we're here to talk to you about a topic that is kind of a mouthful, creating a diverse and inclusive VR and AR industry, a cornerstone for the future of storytelling. Our Twitter handles are right there if you want to tweet questions at us.
Shameless plug.
So yeah, some background about Shift. We started Shift, again, a little over a year ago, because we were looking at the VR and AR industry. We were both working in content creation at the time, and we saw that VR and AR was falling victim to a lot of the same cultural forces of every emerging technology before it, meaning it was mostly white dudes. And we wanted to change that, and we noticed that there was a very unique opportunity with VR and AR specifically in that it's being born right now. So if we can change the way the talent landscape looks right now, we have the opportunity to affect an entire industry right now while it's malleable. So our mission statement is we partner with industry leaders in emerging technologies to sponsor and create opportunities for underrepresented groups. So underrepresented groups is a very broad term, but essentially refers to women and minorities. Some of our previous partners were VRLA, South by Southwest, Max Sennett, Digital LA, and Oculus. The way we do it is we approach a partner, we say, how can we help you guys? And we work with them to do whatever it is that they want to do. So we do a lot of conferences, a lot of events, a lot of education opportunities, and a lot of scholarships for education and scholarships for conferences themselves. Do you want to talk a little bit about Facebook group?
So basically this whole lovely partnership happened when I pinged Julie on Twitter, basically saying like, you're in VR, I'm in VR, I'm a woman, you're a woman, you like Taylor Swift, I love Taylor Swift, let's be friends. And we eventually met at a virtual reality girls party, and that's kind of when everything really clicked and we started to really align on these ideas. And I remember I was driving home one day, and I just randomly called Julie. I was like, is there a Women in VR Facebook group? Because there's like a 360 Pro page, there's like all these various VR Facebook pages. I'm like, why don't we have one for women in VR? And she's like, I don't know. And then we literally just started it, and it kind of exploded from there. When we first started the group, there were maybe 300 people.
Yeah, we were like begging people to join the group. We're like, please join our group.
And we were inviting everyone that we knew in VR. And it kind of became this really powerful community because all of a sudden we were opening up resources. We have this running list of community resources that we've made calendars for, that we've gone like, this is every VR event, this is every festival, here are all the freelancers, here is a directory database, 101 on VR, like storytelling and all of that stuff. And then people were renting equipment to each other, then people were helping each other on shoots. So it was this really powerful way to bring together all these various women, quote unquote, women in VR communities from SF, New York, LA, Seattle, and kind of allowing us to collaborate across the board. But I think the most important thing, which Julie's gonna talk about later, is the fact that when we talk about all of these things and diversity, it's very much all about equality. Men are just as much a part of that equation as women. So we actually have an 80-20% ratio in our group where 80% of our members are female, 20% are men. We vet everyone by our screenshot. 1,700 people want to join, but we basically Facebook stalk you and figure out if you're actually working in VR and can contribute to a positive conversation.
Yeah, so unlike a lot of other Facebook groups out there for VR right now, we vet literally every single person that joins. The only requirements to join are that 1, you're excited about VR and AR, and 2, you're passionate about creating a diverse and equal industry. But again, we keep it at 80% women to 20% men. So things we're going to talk about today. Number 1, things we've learned running this Facebook group, because we've learned a lot of it the hard way. 2, the importance of diversity in storytelling. And 3, some kind of very pragmatic action steps for VR companies who want to create a more diverse and equal industry. So with that, the first thing that we've learned is that a lot of people don't actually know what the word feminist means. Does anybody want to take a stab at it? Anyone? I see a lot of hesitant, like,
There are no wrong answers. Actually, some of them are wrong.
Actually, there's a lot of wrong answers. Okay, well, the answer is a lot simpler than people think. A feminist is a person who believes in the social, political, and economic equality of the sexes. So like, if you're not a feminist, that means you don't think men and women are equal. So like, then what are you even doing, you know? Like, everyone should call themselves a feminist, and everyone should be proud to call themselves a feminist. This particular definition comes from a Nigerian writer, and you might notice it. You might recognize the definition from none other than Beyonce's flawless song, Queen Bee herself. The other major thing we learned is that there isn't always a right answer. This was really hard for us at first because you know, we wanted to say there's a right and a wrong, there's a rule book, there's a right way to do something, and there's a wrong way to do something. But there isn't. You know, like we said, feminism is about equality of the sexes, and that's not always black and white. It's a discussion, it's a conversation, it's a process, and people have to, you know, in order for it to work, we really need everyone to be involved in the discussion. We need it to be a place where people, you know, aren't afraid to say the wrong thing, where we don't jump at each other's throats. We need to be productive about it. I really like, this is something that I just screenshotted from our group. It's from John Voorhees, who's the CEO and founder of Primitive.io. And he posted in our group about being essentially being sexually harassed as a female avatar in virtual reality. And this is just an example of the kind of conversations that you can have in a group called Women in VR, but you can't really have in a group called VR, you know? This sparked a lot of conversation and collaboration, and I think it's that open kind of ongoing discussion that's gonna make this work. Okay, this brings us to the kind of the biggest thing we've learned running the group, is that we had a member ask, why is there an extreme commitment to having the group be 80% women and 20% men? You know, his line of thinking was that 50-50 would make a lot more sense, and I don't think that's an unfair question, because the only requirements to join the group are, one, that you're stoked about AR and VR, and two, that you want to create an equal industry, and that's not gender exclusive. But you know, the thing that we've kind of come up with and started talking about over the last couple of years is the invitation effect. The invitation effect is the idea of feeling invited to pursue a career path or a life choice or any of the above. People don't aspire to careers that they can't imagine themselves having, and whether we like it or not, race and gender play a major role in that. That's why it's so important when we have, you know, female CEOs, or you know, like our first African American president. Like, these were huge things that shape how you know, future generations can look up to what they can become. And you know, with the Facebook group in particular, this is just a number of sort of diverse leaders in the VR and AR industry. With the Facebook group in particular, we wanted it to be a place where the invitation effect with what is experienced outside the industry is completely reversed. So, you know, if you're a recent college grad and you're looking to apply for a job in VR and AR, you're probably going to go to a VR and AR company, mostly white male executives. The person in HR that you talk to is probably a male. The person who does your interview is probably a male. Your manager and teammates are probably mostly male. That's not the most inviting atmosphere as a woman. But we wanted to reverse what that feels like. So we wanted to create a place where there would be all these incredible proactive and productive discussions happening, but where you see the established and dominant industry voices being primarily women. And we've really seen like incredible things come from this. You know, people get jobs. Women at bigger companies like Oculus and Unity will reach out and help you know, women who are just starting their careers. And we really think that this level of community building is how we can change the landscape. So what the hell does all of this have to do with storytelling, and why is half of our talk about storytelling? And the reason is that stories play a huge role in the invitation effect. You know, if we see stories with strong female characters, strong diverse characters that are more often than not when you have strong female characters, it's usually written by a woman. We are inspired by that. And VR and AR is a particularly important medium for this because it is the most immersive storytelling platform to date. It's manipulative in a lot of ways, and we have to be cognizant of that, and we have to make sure that the stories that we're telling, that we're including all diverse viewpoints. I really like this graph because it kind of illustrates all of our major ideas. So the red line is women in computer science. And as you can see, it wasn't always as bad as it is today. It actually used to be much better. But there was a big drop-off in the mid-1980s, and fewer and fewer women started majoring in computer science. So the question is, like, why did this happen? Why is this happening, and why is it still happening? And there is no clear answer to it, but a lot of people have come together and looked at the problem and pinpointed it to 1984 when the personal computer was introduced. When PCs became commonplace in the home, that's when the narrative of the geek was born. That's when we went through a bunch of different ads for this was an Apple II ad or something. And we went through all these ads, and they're all sort of marketed towards boys, therefore gaming. And computers couldn't even do anything that complicated at the time. But they were kind of marketed explicitly towards boys as a tool for boys. And so, again, this narrative is alive and well today when you think of, some tech entrepreneur, you're probably thinking of a white guy in a hoodie in his mid-20s. And that's a narrative, and that's a story, and that's part of the invitation effect, and we have the opportunity to change what that looks like.
Yay, so switching gears a little bit, I'm actually going to focus a little bit more on gender diversity in storytelling, why it's important, why as storytellers, male or female, should we care? So on the topic of why feminism is so important for VR specifically, it kind of comes down to looking at VR. We say it all the time. We always say that VR is this intersection of technology, entertainment, games, and as Julie pointed out earlier, these are all industries that are heavily male-dominated. That being said, if the trends continue how they have been over the past couple of decades, we're going to see these trends bleed into VR. But now it's the time for us to start highlighting diverse voices and diverse storytellers. And we'll get more into that. I have a bunch of fun memes and GIFs to show you guys that will help highlight all of this stuff. I do want to look at some statistics before we definitely dive in. I want to kind of talk about the general lack of gender equality. So right now in America, there is a 5-to-1 ratio of working men to women. And then we also see a drop of IT jobs that happen. So now only about 25% of IT jobs are taken by women. So in my head, that kind of represents tech, right? And so that's one of the intersections. And now moving into kind of the general entertainment section, I clearly don't remember the order of my slides, but I would like to jump to this. And now looking at the general entertainment section. Right now, overall, across the board from film, broadcast, cable, and streaming, less than 20% of principal cast are underrepresented groups. So that's a problem as a whole because now the stories that we are consuming aren't diverse. They're oftentimes about that, American family with the white picket fence and the dog and living in middle America or in the suburbs. And then you start looking at who is creating this content. Who are the primary creative forces behind this content? And so when we look at female writers in entertainment, less than 11% of female writers are coming in film. We have less than 35% coming into broadcast and less than 35% actually across the board for cable and streaming. So that's a writer, which tells me most of our stories are being written by men. And then we look at who is directing these stories, and it gets even worse. You literally have less than 4% female directors in film right now. Film is one of the mediums that have completely shaped our worldviews. We talk about oh my gosh, Beauty and the Beast just came out. I have so many friends as an adult that went to the opening of Beauty and the Beast. So we see movies making a huge impact and they still are incredibly relevant to our culture now. And when I look at these statistics, it scares me, and I do this, and I'm kind of just like, wait, what? How is this a thing? So we're gonna flip backwards at how diversity starts at the beginning. And right now, as content creators, we have this opportunity to encourage and start highlighting different voices. There's so many amazing female writers and directors that I have met that never necessarily got the chance because their voice was always being drowned out by male voices. But now, as Hollywood execs or even studio execs, I'm also the director of VR at a creative agency and a production company. I'm always looking for women to collaborate with, because it's like right now, because of the amount of content that's in VR, if I can start helping highlight these other female voices, it's just going to be a natural progression. And when we think about it, we've been telling stories since the beginning of time. Literally, we talk about how VR is a world-building medium and how it's this immersive medium, but think about how immersive literature was. When we were kids and we would read books for hours on end, if you were a bookworm like me with no friends, like that was my escape into different worlds. And then it just evolved. We now had theater, and then we got into performance art, and eventually games, television, all of it. It's all stories at the end of the day, and VR is just another way to do that. Back to this gift, because it's hilarious. And so that brings me to one of my biggest points, which is VR is a universal medium. Therefore, it's a universal language, one that we can all speak and understand. Because when we go into these experiences, we're never like, at least I never feel like, oh, I watched that VR thing. It's always like, no, I experienced that VR thing. And what's so unique about that is we all experience things differently. And when you think about it like that, that means half of the demographic across the world that will one day be consuming VR is female. That means our demographics are going to be split across the board. It's not always going to be white males. We're going to have African Americans, Asians. Like, this is content that's going to affect everyone. We've already kind of seen it with the Syrian refugee crisis. We're capturing these stories. These are also people who will one day consume this content on a mass scale, and it's going to be the norm. And we're all in it together because it is a universal medium. See, I'm trying to like put in jokes. I don't really remember where they are, so they're kind of catching me by surprise. There's another slide. So it brings me to the larger point of diversity in storytelling, and kind of circling back to why it's so devastating when we see a lack of female writers, female directors, and underrepresented groups portrayed in media. It's because as citizens, as humans, we enjoy consuming these things, right? And what that ends up doing is it subconsciously shapes our worldview. But when men are the main drivers of these stories, what happens there with our worldview is it starts to be told through this singular lens that's reflective on a male-dominated culture that isn't actually accurate to our reality. So that's dangerous as storytellers, and we need to watch out for that. And this brings me to diversity in slates of content as we make it. Earlier in about middle 2016, so just a couple months ago, in London, a photographer gave 501 homeless people disposable cameras. And this brings me to diverse voices, because look at how gorgeous some of these photos are. And just the opportunity to create content and to give it a platform to be seen and heard, it's incredible. And so different voices mean different stories. And that's kind of what we have right now at such an early stage in VR to do, is start highlighting these different voices. Because I know this is kind of an exaggeration, it sounds kind of crazy, and a couple of you guys have heard me say it, but it's like, I would rather die than see this turn into Hollywood 2.0, or Games 2.0, or Tech 2.0. Because at the end of the day, it's a really powerful thing when you start to look at the current political climate, and we're starting to actually highlight everyday voices and stories that we can all resonate with. In order to get mass market consumption, we need mass, diverse media. I've been to Tribeca. I've been to Sundance. How many of you guys have been to those same conferences and same festivals? To be very honest with you, I adore a lot of those content creators. I adore a lot of those pieces, but they are what I call festival pieces. They were designed to win festivals. If we want VR to go wide, we need to be able to make content that can resonate with a larger mass audience. Not everyone's going to sit through 40 minutes of Miyubi and enjoy it, as great as that piece was. Not everyone's going to watch Dear Angelica and be able to enjoy it. So we need to start reaching out to a more diverse pool of content creators so we can have diverse content that will resonate with everyone. Not everything is going to be someone's cup of tea. And that was pretty much all I had to say. So, yeah.
Okay, so the third part is action steps for VR companies. We have a lot of people that reach out to us on the internet, literally, that say like, hi, like they totally get it, and they'll say, hi, I'm starting a company, like I really want a female co-founder. I'm realizing that my investors are white men. I'm a white man. A lot of my consumers are white men, and I don't want to be a part of. I want to help change things. So we've come up with kind of 4 sort of main action steps that we like to give to people. The first one is make diversity a part of company culture, and most importantly, say so. We've seen so many valuable things come from this Facebook group where, people don't have to be afraid of saying the wrong thing, where everyone can identify as a feminist. Before we started the group, we would have a lot of, I would have a lot of men say to me, like, I really support feminists. And I'm like, no, you're also one though, everyone is, And I think that making it a big conversation where everyone's invited to participate is so important. And there's this piece of research, which if you email me, I can send it to you if you're interested in seeing the full report, where they basically found that, at the end of an interview, a candidate was asked for higher compensation and a higher bonus. And managers who were reviewing this candidate, when they were told that people hold stereotypes, so therefore you're reviewing this and you're being told, if this candidate's a woman, you're going to rate her more negatively for asking for a higher compensation. Just knowing that there are stereotypes, they were actually acted those stereotypes. So they were 28% less interested in hiring the female candidate, and they also judged her as 27% less likable. The same information did not alter their judgment of male candidates. But they found that all of this changed when a simple qualifier was added, when they literally just said, this is bad. Don't be like the stereotypes. And it's an incredible piece of research, and they found it to be true for a lot of different situations. Some of you are probably familiar with, there was a psychological experiment done where they put up a sign that said, don't steal chips of wood from the ground. And people would steal the chips of wood. But when they said it said people steal chips of wood from the ground a lot or something. But when they said this is bad, people stopped doing it. So it's just it's really important to have those conversations and to make them a part of a company culture. No matter if you're a man or woman, black, white, whatever. There's also a lot of research done by Adam Grant and Sheryl Sandberg, which I'm also happy to share with you guys if you send me an email. Not surprisingly, these are a number of executives in the VR and AR industry who are very, very vocal about diversity and their support for it. That center one there is Philip Rosedale, who's the CEO of High Fidelity. He's very, very vocal about feminism and the importance of feminism. And it's no surprise that all of these companies have more women at them and they have more diverse talent pools. So that's definitely step one, most important part of the conversation. Just say that it's important.
Also, definitely actively recruit women and minorities. If you want them to be a part of your company, yes, even if the candidate pools are a little bit smaller, take the extra time to actually find candidates that are qualified, that are women and minorities. Oh, my bad. I thought, well, we have another slide somewhere in this lovely presentation that basically says, science even says companies do better when you have women leadership all around. And so the only way to get more women up to that leadership level is we get them in at those entry levels and then work with them to cultivate them to those mid levels and then high levels. Because it's like if you take this computer science major that we saw and the major drop in that, if you're like, well, I need, you know, a senior level female engineer and I'm not finding one, it's because we're not bringing in entry levels when female engineers, making them feel welcomed, and therefore they don't necessarily get to that senior level. Which brings us to this. It's not easy. It's a constant conversation. And I think we switched some slides, but that's okay. Anyways, it's our responsibility, all of us, everyone in this room, everyone in this industry, and pretty much everyone in this world. It's our responsibility to create a better world, especially when we're at the beginning of something that's so powerful and that's going to change so many things.
Okay, this is another really important point. You know, a lot of people come to us and say, you know, there's a pay gap. What do we do? And you know, the only people who can tell if there's a wage gap are the people making the wages and paying them. So it is their employer's responsibility to make sure that one doesn't exist at their own company. It's been proven over and over again that women are less likely to negotiate their salary or ask for a raise. You know, they're also going to be viewed more negatively if they do those things. But being assertive is not a requirement for getting fair pay. And it's the employer's responsibility to make sure that that doesn't happen. This is Mark Benioff, who's the CEO of Salesforce. And he did this exact thing. He went through his entire payroll register and he awarded raises and bonuses to women who were doing the same jobs as men and just simply being paid less for, you know, subjective factors such as how much they asked for at the, you know, to start. And things like this are really important because, again, being vocal about how important diversity is, and two, like, again, employers are the only people who know if there's a pay gap, and they're the only ones who can change it. So it's about kind of taking the initiative and caring.
So funny. You can keep it. I think this is pretty much our last one. We always have this tendency to assume that women aren't the technical ones. A really good example of that's actually Julie. She used to work at a VR content company, and she would go to demos, and she would be the one that sets it all up. She was the producer on the project, and she had a male counterpart that would go and help her and chat with people as well. And people would immediately walk up to him and ask him the technical questions, because they automatically assumed because Julie isn't a woman, she didn't know. And it's really interesting because I get that a lot. I'm still learning a lot of the technical ins and outs of 360 workflow, as well as starting to integrate that into interactive. But I've sat in meetings with some very technical companies that are all about, you know, cloud rendering and rendering off of GPUs and no longer CPUs, et cetera. And I always get commentary afterwards going, wow, I didn't expect you to understand half of what we were saying. And I was like, why? And they never want to say it, but I always feel like a lot of times it's because I am a woman, and oftentimes right now, women are marketing directors, project coordinators. They aren't the people actually sitting in these technical positions, but at the same time, I kind of think we need to get rid of the word technical, if you want to explain or expand on that.
Or covered it with mine.
Yeah. Sorry. But that's our presentation, guys. Thank you so much for listening.